Hello, everyone. Got a small crowd today. That's good. It's parenting. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Jackie. I'm the Events and Comms Coordinator for Pink Boots. I'm also co-director of CoConspirators Brewing. Thank you for coming to the session of parenting in the beer industry. And we have 4 lovely panellists with us that are all lovely parents. Do you guys want to do a quick... Yeah, all mothers. It's being gender neutral. Can we just do a big quick round on who you are? And who you work on?
Hi everyone, I'm Kirrily. I run my own business called Beer Diva. I've worked in beer, I think this is year 23 maybe. And as we're talking about parenting, I have 2 sons, one's nearly 16, the other one's 17, and they both drink awful beer. I'm trying. It's not advocated by me. Sorry. Yeah, non-alcoholic awful beer.
Hi everyone, I'm Jules. I work for Road Brewers in Beechworth. I have a 2-year-old son. He doesn't drink beer yet.
Good.
Hello, I'm Roxy, mum of Eleanor, 15 months old, who's here with us this afternoon because the babysitter couldn't help out, so we'll see how we go. She's got an apple, hopefully that'll keep her amused for a little bit. I am the head of people and culture at Stomping Ground Brewery, been in the beer industry since 2006, which is 15 years or something. Held lots of different roles within beer, sales, events, managing venues in beer-focused venues. Very excited to be here.
I'm Maggie. I got roped in because I work with Jackie at Co-Conspirators, one of the other quarters of Co-Conspirators. I have 2 kids, one of the freshest I think on the panel, a 7-week-old and a 2.5 going on 30-year-old. I think she's harder to manage at the moment. Yeah, 2 girls. But yeah, I work in sales for Co-Conspirators and we all do a little bit of everything. We are building a brew pub at this moment, so put that hat on a little bit sometimes too. It's a construction hat.
Cool. Before we keep going, everyone's got a upflow beer that's at the bar? Cool. This is really casual. I just really want to know, one by one, what are your hardships? Anything that you incurred during your career about being a parent, being a mum? Anyone want to take over and start first? Kirrily?
I think that the toughest thing, obviously being a working mum is tough anyway, I think, but you always end up with this mother's guilt. So particularly in the beer industry where there's a lot of, out of hours stuff that happens and trying to just figure out what you can and can't go to, and it's always that, especially Good Beer Week. Good Beer Week's really hard. My boys are now old enough to be left alone, which is dangerous. But, I do feel like they haven't seen much of me, and, I'm kind of constantly apologising for, hi, I'm still your mum, but I still have to go and work. And so, that's always a juggle. And I think, like being a female in the industry, when you're a minority, it's always going to be a little more tricky to navigate. Just how you do everything. I hadn't really thought about the question, to be honest. But it's just hard.
I was going to add to that with the mum guilt. I I guess I haven't really experienced it too much just yet, and sort of don't feel like we should put any guilt on ourselves. So we do so much at home and then so much at work. But I think the beer industry in general, we're all so passionate about it. So when you're super passionate and love what you do, and then you have a little human who you also are passionate about and love a lot, it's really conflicting to know where your priorities land, especially when I've come from a job that I really love and invest in like wholeheartedly, and then to have another little human that I also want to invest in wholeheartedly, and your priorities change a little bit. Trying to find that balance between the two has been, I think, a tricky thing for me. Also the social drinking and being social aspects of being in the beer industry. It's so much fun, again, why we're all in it. It's really tricky when you're pregnant and a lot more tired or not drinking, and then not everyone tells you that you don't get to start drinking often straight away because you're still breastfeeding for maybe another year. So I think that missing that sort of aspect of it is really tricky, and I guess you sort of slowly drop off on the invites because you're not probably going to want to drink, and that sort of not a sad Roxy story, but I've heard it from a lot of other friends as well, and not just in the industry, but and I've also done it to friends as well. I'll be honest, of just assuming they're probably not going to want to come out because they've got a little one, but I guess just keeping that sort of the invites coming and the social aspect, because you still want to be social and talk to adults. You just might not be able to all the time.
Jules, from a brewer's perspective, how does that differ because you're a brewer?
So I think personally I feel exactly the same way as both of these girls do about both the things that they're talking about. I think for me, probably one of the hardest things was admitting that I couldn't do all the heavy lifting. So when I was actually pregnant, I wanted to keep going and keep doing my job and keep brewing, but there's a lot of heavy lifting and all that sort of stuff involved, and I think that it was very hard for me to admit to myself that I had to stop doing what I was doing. And I think that's probably one thing that was a challenge for me, is actually just letting it go and not pushing myself too hard.
Just on that, actually, I remember it was probably about 10 years ago having a conversation with a female brewer who was actually terrified of the fact of becoming pregnant and then being pushed into a desk job because of the fact that they couldn't actually be on the brewery floor. And it's a real, it's something we need to talk about, is how do you deal with, if we want more women coming into brewing who, then may want to have children, what are the policies around that? And I don't think there are any policies or guidelines around, how you manage that in the workplace.
I think that's potentially a bigger issue for this industry, wanting to look after staff, having proper policy and procedure about tasting beers, tasting sessions, sensory sessions, and what that means for your sales crews that have to drive, for people that have to drive home from work. I think as an industry, we share our knowledge, but we're small businesses that have our own in-house policies and procedures, but a bit of a greater overview. The IBA's got a lot on their plate. I don't want to put any more on their plate. But just some overarching things that a small business can refer to and go, oh, that's a really simple policy. I can download or have a look at that and kind of instigate that in my small business as well. And it's something easy that you then don't have to go, oh, I'm going to go research workplace relation law from 1996 on the OH&S policy that I'll have to read 20 pages about to get one policy for my company. It would be probably nice to have something that as an industry we can refer to and kind of have a bit of guidance and safety policy about. I think safety is a much bigger issue in brewing that can be addressed in a different area. But yeah, it's cool.
I've got a question for you guys. We were having a chat before about what advice would you have for anyone that's starting a family that works in the industry? Do you have any advice for them?
Do all your travel and get all your sleep before you do it?
Maybe a bit more constructive than that. Do you guys have any advice for people that want to start a family that are in our industry do you have any advice?
Yeah, I can go. I was thinking a lot about this in terms of not just advice, but also how can we as an industry, make it more inclusive for families. And a lot of it comes to, you know, having those conversations. Like, well, firstly, if you're a venue manager or a business owner or even a senior leader, is having these conversations with the owners of the business or whoever makes the policy within the business about what are the parental leave options within the company. Do they have one? Have they thought about one? Have they thought about things like, what if one of our brewers is pregnant? How will we approach that? And it's very individual for each person as to what they feel comfortable doing. But starting those conversations as soon as possible, even if perhaps you're not the one who might have a family, but just to, you know, someone else in your company might, or just to make the industry a bit more open to it. And asking for something. So, and you know, sort of you won't get if you don't ask. So asking for things like extra parental leave or I think it's really important that we're trying to, at the moment I'm going to go on lots of different tangents here, but trying to bridge the gap between the wage differences as well. So having the partners, really encouraging them to take extra leave. You know, a lot of times the women will take unpaid leave, or the primary caregiver, and then they will end up having much less super. So perhaps asking your employer, can we keep paying super for the time that I'm not, you know, earning a wage, or can my leave keep accruing? Because often you'll come back from leave and need to take leave because your kids get sick every week at daycare. So, you know, if you don't have any leave accrued, then that's another massive thing. So just having the conversations, just in your workplaces, and asking about it and putting it out there for people to think about it.
And maybe a silver lining from COVID is approaching the workplace situation a bit better. If you have a role that can be done out of the brewery or out of your establishment, can they work from home for a little bit longer to get them back to work, but not having to leave their child or find care? So just looking at the work situation a bit differently. One, there aren't many silver lining of COVID. Working from home is a lot more socially acceptable now. You can do a Zoom call while feeding a baby. They don't have to know. You just angle the camera up. Just put a blanket on, say it's cold. So, yes, you know that. But yeah, just approaching it differently for your staff and having conversations about how to get them back to the workplace and what they'll be comfortable with if they need more time off.
Absolutely, that's been one of the great things about the silver linings of COVID, is now that we all know that we can work from home for those who can do any part of their job from home, and that even the flexibility of when does your work need to be done? Does it need to be done between 9 and 5? Could it be done, you know, in the evening if you prefer to work in the evening, or early morning if that's how you prefer to work, when the baby wakes up at 4:30 in the morning and you could maybe do some more work? I'm looking at you, Eleanor. A different, you know, perhaps it's not full-time, perhaps it's 0.8 or 0.6 of a full-time rate. Perhaps you negotiate that you get the same salary but for less hours. Like just have the conversations as well and ask those questions.
Such a good person from a HR perspective to actually have that insight. Jules, Kirrily, would you like to add to it?
I think it's, you know, kind of feeding off what Roxy's been saying, but rather than the onus having to be on the mum, I think having the onus on the business to actually have those policies in place and really start getting businesses to think about, okay, how are we going to manage this? How are we going to retain those, you know, those staff that do want to have families, so that you're not constantly having to pave the way. And I mean, I know I had to a lot with, you know, when I was having children, trying to kind of navigate what I couldn't do. And, you know, they asked me to come back to work early. I was literally holed up in, you know, toilets with a breast pump, which is really not fun to do because we didn't have that whole work from home thing. And I was like, this sucks. This should not be happening this way, but it was the only way. But yeah, I think making it more, putting it front and centre and getting businesses to be a little bit more proactive about their family policies, I think is something that is, really important as well. So you're not constantly having to kind of ask and push, and, you know, it's because it's daunting enough having a baby, let alone trying to then negotiate all the work stuff as well.
Definitely. I think as we mature as an industry, that we should be putting, that front foot first and actually doing those things, not waiting for people to come to us and ask for that. We should be, when we actually did a Mother's Day post for Stomping Ground, and they asked, how can everyone send in a photo? Like, if you're a mum, can you send in a photo? And I realised that I was actually the first mum in our company, which blew my mind. Wow. And, lots of partners have had children as well, but I was the first mother, child birthing parent. It just, blew my mind. But, and I had actually I've worked in hospitality for my whole career and the beer industry, so I'd never actually worked with someone who'd gone on maternity leave. So we didn't know what to do at all. So I was, setting the standards and the pace of how we were going to navigate it. But our industry, since then we've had 2 more women go on to maternity leave and a few more dads as well. So, our industry really is maturing in that way, and we need to keep making it inclusive, because you will see, your staff retention staying higher of those, often key people with lots of IP, particularly when it's brewers and head office roles as well. You'll keep them for longer if you can look after them and not make them, like Kirrily said, be the one who has to then make the step as well, because it is very daunting.
I'm going to just ask the audience if they've got any questions for our lovely panel. Any questions? Anyone?
Probably more to you, Kirrily. How did you handle in the teen years, or even in the formative sort of younger 5 to 10 years, handling that common presence of alcohol in the family and normalise that it's part of your job and it's so present in the house?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't drink a huge amount at home, but obviously there was always beer around, and my sons knew the term saison before they, knew maths probably. I always just had a rule. They're interested, obviously, because, they see me swirling and sniffing and maybe writing notes about it. And, I was never kind of hands off, go away, blah, blah, blah. The rule was that they were allowed to have a sip, but they had to smell it and tell me what it tasted like first. So it wasn't just like, yeah, you can have a sip of mum's beer. It was, you need to think about it. You need to appreciate it. But that wasn't encouraged, but if it was there and they were intrigued, then, they had to work for it, to work for that sip. Now, they obviously can see the benefits of having a mum in alcohol, although as I said, I thought I had raised them better. I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest. I'm going to be completely brutal. But yeah, look, I think it is almost normalising, and it's something I've thought a lot about, obviously having boys as well, and kind of seeing they do start experimenting in alcohol around that 15, 16-year-old mark. And I've had these ideas of, and I'll probably do it with Cooper, who's 17, a lot of his friends are turning 18 now, actually sit down and do like a proper tasting with them. And I don't care, they're going to go and buy. It's all about standard drinks and bang for buck. That is literally what they're interested in at the moment. But I think if you can educate as much as you can, and I'd be quite interested to see if I got a group of them all sitting down and doing a tasting and doing some food pairing. That might change something in some of them, and just it's always at the back of their mind. And yeah, I think that flavour appreciation rather than the guzzle is kind of what's key.
I'm actually going to note that down and make Matilda do like BJCP notes on a beer to make it like homework. Yeah, it's homework. But in saying that, she's 2.5, and every time she sees a can, she calls it a beer, not like a can of drink. So we realised that when she kind of turned 1 and went, okay, she can't see them as much around the house anymore, so now they're packed away and she doesn't see it, and we don't bring out alcohol until she's gone to bed. Sometimes that's harder on some days, but because it does become really normalised really quickly, and we had to make these are called adult drinks, like coffee. That's an adult drink as well. You have a baby chino because you are a Melbourne child that is going to be a complete hipster. But it is something to think about, definitely something to think about in the next formative years.
Yeah, and I think by it being relatively normal, I've certainly found my two are very open and honest with what they're doing. So I know, for me growing up, it was, obviously not allowed. So I did it and snuck and probably did a lot worse. I probably drank a lot more than I should have done because it was so, naughty and I was rebelling. But, they are very open and honest with what they're drinking, how much they drink, and so, in that respect, at least I know what they're doing.
I'm not a mother, but I have nieces and nephews, and I have a 15-year-old niece who's starting to experiment to the point in the last school holiday she was hiding cider cans from my sister in her bedroom. And my partner and I obviously are in beer, and it's a really good thing about trying to educate. We're trying to educate her and don't binge drink and drink properly. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, that's the key. They all know to pour it into a glass at least. That's one thing.
That's good.
They hate cans though. They're like, no cans. I think it's just, again, I think it's this image thing. Bottles just for them. And it's interesting actually. I was really surprised. I'm going, but cans chill faster, Exactly. So yeah, it's interesting.
Do anyone have any other questions?
I found it quite hard. I was doing sales for CoCon throughout both my pregnancies, and I get really sick for the entire 40 weeks, and beer is quite disgusting to me, actually. Even just the smell of a can opening in the same room, I was running to the bathroom. So I found it really hard to be out and about and going into bars to do sales. So thankfully going online for it and phone conversations and checking in, we do work from home. So there was no way I was getting kicked out of conversations when they're happening in the other room. But I think that is a good point to keep them involved. I felt quite separate from the industry because I couldn't go out and go to things. So I'm not providing an answer, but I think it's a very good point. Sorry. I think it's a good point. And I guess just making the hours of things a bit more family friendly. We can't obviously get on it at lunchtime all the time, but making events about food pairing and making work events more lunchtime is something a lot more parents can achieve around daycare hours rather than things always being at night.
I was going to add to that there's some really great templates on, I think it's Fair Work and another one I can't recall right now, but it's got like a step 2 guide as to what to do when someone's going on leave, and a big part of it is the communication. So really having those discussions with the employee about how they would like to be communicated, how often they would like to be communicated with, what types of things they'd like to be invited to. Like, do they want to be invited to every single meeting, or would they like to be told about every social event, or would they like nothing at all, and making it okay for them to answer in any way at all. Finding out their preferred method of communication as well. It's probably not their work email. Just having a personal email they can send to, or maybe they just want a text message. And just making it really covering all the bases, I suppose, as to what they will feel comfortable with, so you know what the expectations are. And even setting in a few times when you will tell them, okay, I'm going to check in with you on this date and this date, so they kind of know what's coming, so it's not a scary, like, oh, work's calling me, do they want me to come back to work, what do they want? So I think just knowing the expectations and preferences of the employee is the best.
That is a very good point, much better than mine. No, I think communication is one of the biggest things. You kind of get separated from your business or your industry very much, and you lose maternity leave, you can lose a bit of your personality, so it becomes very much about someone else. So your workplace, still remembering who you are and what you like, even if it's once in 6 months kind of thing, it makes a lot more of a difference than you disappear for 12 months and you come back and they're like, oh, hey. You want to be remembered and thought of by your work colleagues. So definitely keeping the communication pathways flowing.
It's kind of, I guess, what I was saying about at the beginning of, not being invited to things and social things. Even if it's hey, we're all going to have Friday night knockoffs. Do you want to come down for, at 5 o'clock and say hi and then go home with the baby or whatever it might be? Just inviting people to those kind of things and keeping communication open. They might not come to any of them because babies are on their own schedule, but it's nice to be involved.
Yeah, and on that point, I guess just making sure that, if you do invite, a new parent, that they can actually take their children where you're going. Because I remember years ago, I had one of mine who was tiny, and I made all the effort to go into town. It was really lovely that I'd been invited to come along for team drinks, and I walked into this bar and they went, no children. I was like, fuck. I've literally taken an hour and a half to get here. I've got him strapped to my chest. It's all good. I've timed the feeds, and then it was like, no, out. And I just I felt just really unloved at that point. I was like, okay,
Pretty sure that's illegal.
I'll take me and my baby home again then. So yeah, it's just being conscious of all of that stuff as well. But ultimately, mothers are really good to have in your workplace because we are bloody efficient. We can do a 5-day week in 3 days. We're really, good at time management, and you do, you get there once the baby brain goes. But I think just encouraging and doing everything you can to, as you say, as Roxy said, keep that IP, that experience, and the people in the business is, it's really important.
Can I add to the family or having children in a venue aspect as well? Something that I was thinking about is, I'm sure there are lots of people that have brew pubs and beer halls, and it's really important that if you say you're a family-friendly venue, that you actually do things that make you family-friendly.
Have a change table.
Yes. And it's really small things that make a huge difference. Like, obviously not everyone can have a playground or a cubby house, but to do something small like having a change table makes a huge difference in feeling comfortable changing your baby, having somewhere, maybe just even a quiet corner where someone can feel like they can go and breastfeed if they need to. Having really welcoming staff. Like, that is probably the biggest difference in the places that I will go back to all the time now, is someone who's been accommodating and just said straight away, do you need a high chair? Can I get you anything? Welcome, as opposed to, we don't have children here. Awful.
Can you keep your child quiet?
Even small things on the menu. It doesn't even need to be a kids menu per se, but having something smaller that is easy to feed kids and doesn't cost $20. Maybe not always chips. But yeah, there's those little things. Having the welcoming staff who are really really on board, and I know it's also can be stressful having 20 kids running around on a Sunday afternoon. That's also pretty hectic. But those parents will keep coming back. During the week they'll come back and have 30th, 40th, 50th, whatever, in your venues. So I think it's really important too.
Was there any more questions? Anyone else? Hi.
When you all returned to work, some of you go back full time to do waiters, some of you start part time, did you have and then move up to full time? How did you return to work?
Who wants to go first? I can go again.
So when I went back 3 days a week. That's where I started. I'm now back to 4 days a week. And I don't really plan on going back 5 days a week until he goes to school. So I'm quite happy doing 4 days a week. So I've just taken it quite slowly. So I think for the first probably 6 months that I was back at work, it was just 3 days. And I've just moved it back up to 4 in January. So that was after about 6 months of being back at work.
Did you do full days? Or?
Yes, yeah, full days. I think as Roxy said, your priorities do change a little bit. Like I lived for brewing, and that was all I ever really wanted to do. And so I was really excited to go back to work, but at the same time not so excited about leaving my son at daycare and not with me. So I've just started off slow and built it back up because I did find it quite hard to be without him. So, yeah.
And in saying that, as small businesses, you should probably know your legal responsibilities for women returning to the workplace, the training you need, or men coming, any parents coming back after extended leave, if any training needs to be updated, safety and procedures. If you do have a breastfeeding mother on staff, you legally are required to provide pumping facilities for them to be able to go and use.
Wish I knew that.
Yeah, it's illegal now to say go use the toilet. So there are rights and responsibilities on both sides of that. Like as women, you can read up on your rights, so you can go and ask for the things and just ask for them. It's a conversation to be had, not saying give me this kind of thing. But as a workplace, if you're a small business owner, you should know what legally you do have to provide. And be aware of it beforehand. Yeah. The mum's not going to have time or room in her brain to do all the research. Or the dad.
The going back 3 days a week is awesome advice. I reckon someone said to me to go back on half days at first, and then just see how you go with that, and then slowly increase it. So yeah, I went back. I think it was 3 days. I can't even remember now. But I've worked up to 9-day fortnight, so I have every second Friday off to hang out with Eleanor, which is great.
Oh, I went back 3 days. I think the first time, and then the second time. Well, I went back pregnant. I didn't realise. So I was lucky that, I was asked to come back a bit earlier than I wanted to. And I was lucky I worked in an all-male team, because I literally, the week I went back, I realised I was pregnant again. And I hid it until I was about 22 weeks, because I was like, I can't come back and tell them I'm pregnant again. But then they were really good in terms of work from home and stuff as well. So I did a bit of both.
Thanks, guys. Was there any other questions? Laura?
This actually is a very interesting question for me. What I can tell you is that brain fades while you are pregnant are very real, and they happen. I actually had quite a serious incident at work while pregnant. So I was, I think, 11 weeks, and I opened the wrong valve in the wrong spot, and I got boiling water in a gumboot. Skin grafts and all kinds of things later. I ended up not working as a brewer for a little while after that, because I couldn't walk. And then when I did actually manage to come back, I was probably a little bit too far along to be doing much. So that was a bit of an unfortunate incident. But I think in terms of that, just be very wary of what you're doing. Think about what you're doing while you're doing it. That for me was just something that I wasn't thinking about, and I just opened the wrong valve, was standing in the wrong spot. And so I think just being aware of your surroundings and just try to think through things before you do them. But also, like I found that the heavy lifting, but even things like there's just so many physicalities to actually doing this particular job, brewing, that I actually found I did have quite a few limitations. Like even something simple like a dry hop, you're lifting 10-kilo bags, you're doing all sorts of things like that. Working on the bottling line, there's lots of twisting, and you're still lifting 14-kilo boxes. Like, just everything has a little bit of a limitation. So I think for me it was just making sure that I was really very clear with our head brewer about what I was and wasn't comfortable with, and how far I could go with lifting, and just trying to keep the communication open as much as possible between the two of us, so that we weren't putting me at risk, essentially. And I was the first woman at our brewery to actually have a baby. And so it was pretty uncharted territory for us as well when we actually started going through it. And so we just had to communicate as much as possible to keep things going well. And we got through it.
Not to put words in your mouth, but obstetricians, GPs, whoever's managing your pregnancy don't know your role and the physicality of it, so it is best that you kind of decide where you want to set your limits and make sure they know your head brewer or whoever you're working for. It changes from 11 weeks to 13 what you can do, and coming back, if you decide to have more children, things can happen a lot quicker in your second pregnancy, so that can be quite different again. And also coming back to work after extended time off, women can be a lot more prone to hip and shoulder injuries, especially when it's involving lifting straight up and lifting and turning. So you really need to be aware of that, easing back into the physicality of roles on the brewing floor when you're getting back in, because I think it's like 80% of women sustain their back injuries post-pregnancy. This is in a... Don't use that statistic. It's not in the brewing, it's from a medical side, but they'll sustain more lower back and hip injuries and shoulder injuries post-pregnancy than they will beforehand. So it is very much to be aware of it, both ends of it.
Great. Thanks, guys. Was there any other questions? We've had some really great questions. Is that all? Oh.
Roxy, where do you get these apples?
I know, it's like a magic apple. Seriously, she like had the most epic tantrum on the way here, so much that I left my backpack on the bus, and now she's fine. So maybe it's you. I'll leave it with you for the rest of the day. Is that okay?
Very cool. Thank you, everyone, for attending this session. Thank you to our panellists, and have a good beer week. Thank you.